How to become a top-class central midfielder.
Now, regardless of the type or the profile or the identity of the central midfielder, it's the position above all others that requires the 360-degree profile. Regardless of however we break the attributes down, whether it be the way they receive 1v1, the types of pressure, their awareness, the passing techniques, they're all required in all four directions and all planes of motion. Now, obviously, this isn't the same for other positions. If you look at a centre-back, they're mostly going to be pressed from the front. If you look at a full-back, they're constantly playing through 180 degrees with the touchline to the back. But a central midfielder, they have to pass and receive in all four directions. Now, a phrase I like to use is make sure your strengths get you in the team, but your weaknesses don't get you out of the team. So for young players in particular, what reason are you giving a manager or a coach to choose you every single week? Now, ideally, players will be 8, 9, 10 out of 10 across the whole board, but we know those players are very few and far between. So what is your elite strength? What is your elite quality? What are you bringing to the group consistently? And that should also influence your types of practice. So what are you working on to make sure you have that 8, 9, 10 out of 10 elite quality, whilst also making sure you don't have the 1 or 2 out of 10 weakness that's going to get you out of the team. Now, if we put central midfielders under the microscope, it's the position that has so many different attributes and demands and profiles and requirements within the one position. And we'll break these down in this video. But if we look at identities and profiles, for example, we could have a Kante or a Makalele type player who is judged on stopping counter-attacks, breaking play up, clever positioning. You then could have an Ødegaard type, so someone who plays in between the lines, someone who's creative, clever, can outplay people, plays final passes, judged on more creativity and goals and assists. Or you could have a Busquets type, so more of your spider in the web who connects the units together, dictates and controls the tempo of play. So the point being here, there's so many different types of central midfielders. So we've categorised them and broken them down into several different identities, and this will really help players focus on those particular strengths, which will then influence types of practice, clips that they're watching, players they're being influenced by, etc.
Generally, we can split central midfielders into 5 different profiles. Firstly, we have the spider in the web, so this is the player who connects the units together, they receive under high pressure, clever with their angles to become that free player, they control the tempo by speeding up and slowing down the rhythm. Then the second type is the runner, so this is your box-to-box midfielder who impacts the game through forward runs, high pressing actions, they cover a lot of ground and distance every game, physically tenacious. Then we have the quarterback, so this is the player who receives passes off the back line continually, they dictate games through that range of pass, the switches of play, and they make opposing back lines worry about the spacing behind just as much as the spaces in front. And then next up, we've got the creator. So this is your typical 10. So the second striker who plays between the lines, they play final passes, they eliminate pressure 1v1, they feed those top line players. And then the final profile is the powerhouse or the spoiler. So they break play up, they stop those counter-attacks, they're always connected with the back line, defensively excellent in terms of the number of tackles or the number of interceptions. Now, when we look at these individual profiles, but as a collective or as a unit, they should combine together to offset and complement each other. Think back to the point we made earlier about those specific strengths. So a midfield trio, for example, of all creators, that would have really strong deficiencies, whereas different profiles together, this creates optimal efficiency and balance. So think back to any of the best teams in history. You'll generally find they combine different profiles together in those central areas. Now, regardless of the profile, all central midfielders have 2 prominent technical requirements in both frequency and efficiency, and that's receiving and passing techniques. Now, we'll cover receiving techniques in a separate video, but here we'll look at how to develop passing techniques. So let's begin with the stats. The top 25 central midfielders last season amassed 37,000 passes combined. No surprise to see Rodri at the top with over 2,700 and an average of 72 successful passes per game. Now, pass completion alone isn't a reflection of performance. The key stat is actually the direction and influence that these passes have. Players could have a high pass completion, but just go sideways and backwards and not impact the game. Now the numbers tell us in Rodri's case, he's constantly breaking lines. But how do we replicate these key passing variables in practice? Technical mastery begins with unopposed repetition, and the passing range should be varied, including off both feet, driven, lofted, swerved, one touch, off a moving ball, off all surfaces. Now there's hundreds of great passing exercises, but here's a fun and challenging example. So in pairs, the closest player drives the ball to the partner, who's got 3 touches to keep the ball up, no bounce. Now if they get to 3, that gets them a point, and it's the first player to 5 points. The receiver then drives the ball back to the player, and the process continues. Now the progressions here would include increasing the distance, passes under head height, under waist height, keeping the ball up feet only, and then no bounce between each other. Now technical mastery should then progress away from straight lines and through 360 degrees. So activities such as this, where players have to think about the principles as opposed to just the technical execution. So the constant angles to open up solutions, no straight line receiving, consistent adjustment of hips and shoulders, and then progress this to decision making but under pressure. So layering in intricate movements prior to receiving, passing and decisions then being dictated more by the pressure and the free spaces and the spare players as they would in a game. Now the further up the elite level the player is, the practice should look as close to the game as possible. So really it should look like you've cut a section of the pitch out and then dropped it onto the training field. Now these two examples here side by side. The left hand side, this is a player working through passing techniques under pressure, but with multiple free players and minimal interference, whereas the right hand side, it's an even numbered spider in the web possession, but the blue player is the overload, so consistently connecting the play. And then the final layer is to apply the decisions and techniques, but within a tactical format and structure. Now these collective principles and game ideas though are specific to the team or the coach, but they should include principles and variations of directional progression, reacting to teammates in specific movements, positioning in desired moments of the game, etc. Now, as we explained at the beginning, the older a player is, they should have a really clear idea of what profile and identity they are. And this self-awareness really allows players to design a clear plan of how they're going to develop, because what you can measure, you can improve. Now, the details of this process are far too variable to cover in just one video, because every player's got their own unique identity. However, every central midfielder should have a specific plan based firstly on their identity, then how are they going to improve the 1v1 pressure, the receiving techniques and the passing techniques. Each of these plans should begin with unopposed mastery, how they progress through 360 degrees, how they then will develop these techniques in opposed decision-making formats, and then finishing all these 3 areas in a larger tactical format. And that concludes the video on central midfielders. For more video content, webinars and books, please visit www.trainingspecific.com.